Hi everyone, welcome to Mechanical Diaries YouTube channel. In this video I am going to explain about the bearings details. So don't skip this video, maybe it will help you while you're going to attend the interview. Let's start the chapter. Basically bearing have only two types. One it's a friction, and another it's a anti-friction. Which bearing not rotate with shaft? It's called friction bearing. And which bearing rotate with shaft? It's called anti-friction bearing. I hope everybody know about bearing numbers. But you should know the details of each number what is called. Here I show you one bearing number, it's 6102. First number it's bearing type, and second it's a bearing load. Third and fourth it's a bearing ID or shaft OD. How we'll get the OD size? Listen carefully. First we'll add last two number, then multiply with 5. So bearing ID it's a 10 mm. This calculation only when last number it's start from 00 up to 09 only. Before know the types of bearing, we should know the types of bearing load. All bearing will be calculated by two load only. One it's a radial load, another it's a axial load. Radial load means it will calculated the up and down load, and axial load it means it will calculated front and back load. Next we'll move to types of anti-friction bearings. Before we'll know what is anti-friction bearing. Anti-friction bearing will carrying the shaft thrust and radial load, so mostly this types of bearing will be used in all types of pumps and compressors. There are 4 types of anti-friction bearing used in pump and compressors. First radial ball bearing, second it's a radial roller bearing, third it's a thrust ball bearing, last it's a thrust roller bearing. These all 4 bearing be used in pump and compressors. First we'll see the details of radial ball bearings. There are 4 type of radial ball bearing available. First it's a deep groove ball bearing. This bearing type has low friction and can operate over a wide range of speeds and can carry radial and axial loads in both directions. Next it's a angular contact ball bearing. This bearing have 2 types, one it's a single contact and double contact ball bearing. This bearing sustains significant axial loads in one direction at the same time as radial loads, mostly this type of bearing used in gearboxes, pumps, electric motors and other high-speed applications. Next it's a 4-point contact bearing. This kinds of bearing used for support axial load in both directions. Last it's a self-aligned ball bearing. Self-aligning ball bearings used for where aligning the shaft and housing is difficult or where the shaft may bend, such location mostly will be used. In this image I show on the bottom it's a rolling element contact, while running time shaft will be contact on this location only. Next we'll move to radial roller bearing. There are totally 5 types of radial roller bearing available. First it's a cylindrical radial roller bearing. This types of bearing will be used in high-performing system. Next it's a needle radial roller bearing. Needle roller bearings can carry high radial loads only, this bearing not designed to carry axial loads. Tapered radial roller bearings. Tapered roller bearings are commonly used for moderate speed, heavy-duty applications and where durability is required. Next it's a barrel radial roller bearing. These use rollers as the rolling elements and have a high load capacity. Last it's a spherical radial roller bearing. A spherical roller bearing is a rolling element bearing that permits rotation with low friction and permits angular misalignment. Up to now I explained the radial load bearing, next I am going to start thrust bearing. First you know what is radial and thrust load. Radial bearings support the force that is applied vertically to the shaft. Thrust bearings support a force applied in the same direction as the shaft. Don't confused, thrust means it's an axial load, front and back movement. We'll see the types of thrust ball bearing. There are 2 types available. One it's a thrust ball bearing. Thrust ball bearings are designed to take axial loads at high speeds, but they cannot handle any radial load. Next it's an angular contact thrust ball bearing. Angular contact ball thrust bearings are designed to accommodate both radial and thrust loads. Visually how you will identify radial or thrust bearings. Rolling element like ball or roller placed in center position, it's called radial bearing, then rolling element may be placed in side position, it's called thrust bearing. Finally reached to last types, it's a thrust roller bearing. Thrust roller bearing also have 2 type, one it's a cylindrical roller thrust bearing. This bearing designed with a simple structure that provides high axial load capacity and rigidity. Ideal for low speeds. Next it's a spherical thrust roller bearing. Spherical roller bearing is a rolling element bearing that permits rotation with low friction and permits angular misalignment. These all the types of bearing used in refinery. I hope everyone know about the basic of bearing. Next we'll see the internal parts, those bearing ball and roller bearing. First we'll see the ball bearing, outer ring, rolling element, cage, and inner ring. Next, roller bearing internal parts. Parts same like ball bearing internal parts only, but rolling element will be change. Ball bearing rolling element its ball, and roller bearing rolling element its roller. Up to now you saw the anti-friction bearing types. Now I will show you friction bearing types. First we'll know what is a friction bearing. A friction bearing consists of a fixed, non-moving bearing surface, such as machined metal or pressed-in bushing, that provides a low friction support surface for rotating or sliding surfaces. And there are two bearing available, one it's a sleeve bearing, and second it's a push bearing. Finally we'll see types of cage. The cage is an important component of a rolling bearing. It keeps the rolling elements apart to prevent mutual contact between element and raceway. And it keeps the rolling elements evenly spaced. There are many types of bearing cage available, but here I will show you some important cage. Riveted steel cage, pressed steel cage, brass cage, spherical steel cage, and polyamide cage. Polyamide cage mostly used in angular contact bearing only. Thanks for watching. Join with us and stay with Mechanical Diaries.